a useful discipline because it exercises all the qualities of discrimination. It calls upon intuition, requires you to scratch around not just for rationalizing factors in your makeup, but for the deeper ones. And indeed, of course, anatomy can be very dull if you're not exercising these deeper faculties. One needs to start off with the basic acceptance of the fact that man is the grand symbol of the universe, that his physical body mirrors in its structure a microcosm of the universe. If you wish to understand what lies beyond the Milky Way, study man. If you wish to understand the atom, study man. And so, by implication, whatever part of his anatomy we focus on, it is expressive somewhere, somehow, of cosmic factors, cosmic processes. And today we're going to look at the subject of man's skin. A field which is still very confusing to medical science. Because although we can diagnose certain skin conditions and clear them up quite easily, skin conditions are notorious for their unpredictability and for their obduracy, the way in which they persist, exacerbate and remit, and seem to be more than any other condition tied up with the human mind and the human emotion. We need to start off by exploring that observation a little further. The Chinese called the skin the carpet of the brain. The Chinese called the skin the carpet of the brain. We need to understand by that implication that the brain may be likened to us, to you and me. And the carpet, of course, is what we walk on, what we sit on, and indeed the Chinese sat more frequently on it than we do, and sometimes lounge on it. And we could see it then as the ultimate cushion between the monad and its environment, between the spark of the divine and its ultimate nature. The monad with its various layers, atmic, buddhic, monastic, mental, emotional, physical, and on the periphery of the physical, the skin. So, it is the last bastion. The skin is the last bastion of the monadic consciousness. Beyond that, the monad has little influence, and it is therefore the receiving ground of many forces which could kill the body still the vehicle in incarnation. If the surface skin were not resilient, if it was not for the fact that it can repair itself faster than any part of the body, and so on. But we need to exercise our intuitive faculties further when we say that the skin is the carpet of the brain. We know only too well in the West that it is the carpet that is the ultimate receiver of all the dirt, the dust, the moist effluences of the man. And the skin is the repository of the effluence of the brain. Much of the mental and emotional excretions of the brain find their way into the skin, just as a carpet will pick up the dirt and dust of the occupant's activities. This is highlighted for us by the example of the skin on the sole of the feet. And this skin here contains the excretory materials of most of the organs of the body, which are deposited primarily in an etherico-physical crystalloid structure. So the etheric matrix of the body, plus some of the physical counterparts, finds its excretory material being deposited in the sole of the feet. Well, the brain as an organ deposits its mental and emotional excreta that can't normally radiate outwards through the aura in the skin. If a person has a karma of great introversion, where they have been introverts for life after life, have been extremely shy, and have, in addition to the changed the soul ray, which occurs once in every 30 lives, change the soul ray. This can sometimes herald a skin condition, especially the disease known as psoriasis, which is referred to Esoteric Healing, book part 1. Earlier in the year, we studied the contours of the grey mass of the brain. We saw how it was a giant mass thrown into folds, really like an upper carpet, or if you like, a canopy, is a better word, more implicating of esoteric matters, the folded canopy. The carpet on the floor, of course, is the skin. There are other organs of excretion. The skin excretes, and the other two main organs in the body for excretion, and I'll define excretion in a minute, are the kidneys, great organs of excretion. which long term, given sufficient time, can excrete almost anything they need time. The kidneys can excrete a huge variety of material, almost everything. At any one time, 40 or 50 materials. Each drop of urine secreted by the kidney contains 40 or 50 excretory products, toxic materials, 40 or 50 of them. And the other excretory organ is the lung. There's the lung. And the lungs excrete mainly carbon dioxide and water. The lungs can't function without water. They have to be wet. Their surface, as I've said many times, is the size of this room, immense. So here are your three physical excretory organs. The etheric excretory organ is the aura. Now what does the skin excrete? The skin excretes sweat. And sweat contains toxic material, mainly nitrogenous. By nitrogenous we mean generally coming from nitrogen or nucleic material or meat, fish, nucleic material from the nucleus of cells. The skin excretes sweat with this in it, and it has, of course, with that other function. We will see later that the skin has very esoteric functions as well. When we talk about excretion, you need to know what excretion means. It should be differentiated from elimination. We eliminate feces. We eliminate waste material. But of course we mean by elimination material that hasn't really been in the body at all. There's the body. Physiologically, just a tube. Physiologically, just a tube. All right, we can put a head on it. We can put arms on it. Legs on it. But that is still the body, a tube. And when we talk about elimination, we're talking about material put into the tube and passing down it 22 feet of length, but never having gone into the body substance and then being eliminated without having been in the body. Therefore, by definition, excretion means material that has passed into the cells and out of the cells, which means it's been in the body, in the cell. That's the difference between elimination and excretion. So we're talking about excretion. And because the material has been inside of us, it contains us in it. That's a very important matter. So the skin is eliminating not a gaseous waste, the last stuff, or a vaporous, but harsh, solid material which has been inside of us. Another authority has called the skin the third lung. Other authorities call the skin the third lung. But not concerned with the lungs today so much, but with the skin. The skin was once very, very thin on man. That divine branch of mankind which materialized on the earth which did not merely reach the etheric level and blend its etheric body with the highest of the anthropoids, but actually materialized, produced a physical vehicle on the earth with a skin that was very, very thin indeed. And it coincided with a time when the planet was really ruled by insects, the most successful of all the phyla. Insects swarmed uncontrolled all over the planet. Poor man was materializing himself a physical body that had a very thin skin indeed. He was plagued by insects. It was only much, much later, in esoteric historic time, that man's skin became thick enough for him to be able to deal with insects. The subject is so vast that we must tackle it from several viewpoints. Man has three basic tissues which correspond largely to the three major rays. He has on his outside of the tube ectoderm. I'm coloring him in red here for the first ray. And ectoderm comprises virtually all the skin of the body. This skin we're talking about is really a huge organ, probably the largest organ in the body, larger probably than the liver. And it's really a sheet of material which has a certain depth to it. There's the skin. It's about 1.5 square meters. And that's the organ. Then the skin. It has a depth to it, obviously, which gives it the organ structure. But in the course of development of the physical body, the skin puckered and evaginated. It puckered and evaginated. And so a variety of organs were formed out of the skin. And one was the brain, which you shouldn't be surprised about. Or if you like, from ectoderm, which is this layer that we're talking about, 1 and 3. Watch the board a moment. The skin of the eyelid, the surface of the eye, and even the lens, which was an evagination of ectoderm, even the lens of the eye are all skin. They're all skin. As is the brain, and as is the hair, and as are the nails, and numerous other organs. So when we talk about the skin embryologically, we're really talking about a host of organs, all of which can reflect disorders of one part of it, the brain. So we shouldn't be surprised about that an upset in one part of the ectoderm should cause an upset in another. We shouldn't be surprised if we loll about an open fire, sitting too close to the fire, that the skin of the face should get hot, but that the sinuses should be affected. That part of the ectoderm which is inside, but is ectoderm nevertheless. So if a child grows up and his parents don't care whether he flops around too close to the fire, he develops not a disease or a disorder of his facial skin where he may merely get chilblains, but sinusitis, an extension of the skin folded inwards. So when we talk about ectoderm, or skin, we imply many things. And we even imply the first ray, and relate the skin to the first ray and the first house, which is ruled by the first ray and the seventh. Saturn in the first house can suggest a sallow skin. And we even talk about an ectodermal type, a whole type of person who is ectodermal, with the emphasis on the ectoderm. Perhaps it's time now to put in the other two kinds of tissue. The second kind of tissue is the inner lining, the tube that runs right through the body. The surface of that tube is called endoderm. Ecto, or outer skin, endo, or inner skin, derm meaning skin. Outer skin and inner skin. So the tube running through us and its modifications, which are numerous, modified to the appendix and all sorts of other things. That is made up of array-free tissue. And lastly, the three, the mesoderm, the filling between the two. The filling between the two. And the filling is muscle and blood vessels and connective tissue. So there are your three main tissues corresponding to the three major rays. And that's called mesoderm, M-E-S-O-D-E-R-M, middle skin, middle filling. Therefore, we differentiate in the esoteric between three personality types that emerge from three anatomical types. So we talk about the first ray physical body, which is an ectomorph. Ectomorph. Shape morph. A skin type of person who is tends to be tall, lanky, thin, bony, the ectomorph. He's all skin and he's all nerves. He's got this huge sensitive surface to him. compared to the rest of his body. The taller you are, the more skin you have to the rest of the body. So we talk about ectomorphic types. Ectomorphic types. Long, gangly, thin, often pink and ruddy and flaky. Turns all the colors of the rainbow if he eats anything. Hypersensitive, allergic, and so on. We call that kind of physical body a Ray 1 physical body. And when we do esoteric psychology and do a ray analysis, we talk about the ray types of the physical body. And here is a Ray 1 physical body. Damn sensitive individual. Can't stand too much sun. They burn and blister and peel. Can't stand unusual foods. They get allergic or get asthma. Can't stand drafts. The moment a half an inch of window is left open in the house, they can feel the draft. They're damn sensitive. So, to this type of individual, we relate a whole string of personality qualities. These have been listed very carefully, if I remember rightly, in the 7 Rays Handbook. Gerald, would you get me one of those books so that I can point them out? So the skin type of person is a psychological type. Sleeps badly. Tosses and turns and moves around. He's uncommunicative. He's gangling, he's nervous, he's sociophobic. Hates the attention, central attention. Pushing himself into corners to get out of the way of the crowd. They pick up almost any sort of phobia, anything in which they think they're being looked at or watched. Give them alcohol to drink and they go quiet. Whereas the Ray 3 physical type talks his head off, chatters away. So when you're struggling with your ray analysis, think about the ectomorphies, mesomorphies and endomorphies and ask questions. When you're struggling to put your finger on what is first ray in the individual, think of what I said today. Is he a nervous type? Not just nervous in the sense of being hysterical. We mean nervous, sensitive ones. Sensitivity is an important function, factor in discipleship. Very important indeed. It parallels all your growth. Whether your growth towards increasing sensitivity is turbulent, or easy, or smooth, and perhaps if we are suffering stress, which implies an increase of toxins, poisons, and the kidneys can only do their work grossly. They're not an auric eliminator, but the skin is an auric eliminator. It does excrete aurically. And what might tend to slow down auric excretion would be dead material on the surface of the body. So if you suspect that subtle toxins at the etheric level, remembering that we use etheric vitamins, and that our etheric body is much more dynamic than the physical, that it works 100 times faster than the physical metabolism, then you must understand that it must rid itself of etheric toxins. And the flow outwards through the skin of auric energy is inevitable. It must be kept working. Now that may be for you. Certainly it's worth considering if a person is sluggish from an excretory point of view. And that would be suggested if his lungs were weak, if he had emphysema, bronchitis, atelectasis, organ fast. If any of these conditions, kidney, skin, lungs, suggest difficulty with excretion, or the person is choked aurically, then perhaps skin therapy would be helpful. The removal of outer material, pumice stone, using a pumice stone, using oil, maybe worthwhile considering even steam baths to help rid the outer skin of its dead one. The body is an eye. The body is an eye. At least it becomes an eye as we tread the path. Our sensitivity grows. And we begin to find that what the Buddhists teach is true, that the senses begin to overlap. The senses begin to overlap. So we find experiments behind the iron curtain showing that some people can sense, detect colours with their skin. Be blindfolded and they can tell the thermal emission of a colour different from another. And this is all tied up with a process that we have described in the past called esolepsy. Esolepsy, a neologism produced by Robert Browning, who loves neologisms. Not consciousness going outwards like epilepsy, consciousness lost, but consciousness directed inwards, esolepsy. And when we learn meditation, we eventually practice esolepsy. And by that we mean that the senses are enhanced because the consciousness is turned inwards. And we begin to hear things that we don't normally hear. I've pointed out many times before these signposts on the path of unfoldment. Unfoldment is a strand of wool of many colors. One of the strands in this major strand is that of sensitivity. And in epilepsy we begin to hear things like the firing of the masseter muscle that I've told you about, the muscle that lies over the middle ear. In epilepsy, when we're relaxing, this is usually the last muscle to relax. It holds the jaw firm. Most people can relax everything and they forget the jaw. Hold on to the jaw. It's usually only when you fall asleep that the masseter muscle relaxes. When you're meditating and you're relaxing very rapidly, you sometimes slip into epilepsy just before the masseter muscle relaxes. So you can hear it firing. We hear things. We even begin to hear with regions associated with our most alert chakras. So you can hear with the whole region around the solar plexus. The slightest pin drop or noise or scratch can be like a hammer blow on your solar plexus. The body becomes an eye. The eye is the whole of the aura containing the physical body in it. Big globule eye like that. Senses overlap. And you are sensitive as a globule. The whole aura is sensitive. Sensitive to people's presence, feel them, feel their nature, their auric emissions, and so on. The healthy skin is absolutely paramount for us. We're going to have a short break, 10 minutes, get up and stretch yourselves. And then I'm going to the matter of Kirlean photography, because it is so intimately related to the phenomenon of the skin. It is as much the duty of this college as it is your duty as students to debunk so-called phenomena where they are based on false grounds, false premises. Now, the matter of Kirlean photography is made difficult because, as is usual with matters like this, has become tinged with emotion and a lot of false misconceptions and even hysteria. Most people who come into contact with Kirlean photography are those who go quite innocently into a festival and have their fingers placed on a high voltage pad, a button is pressed, a photograph is taken, and they come out as pleased as punch with what they believe to be a photograph of their etheric body, a photograph of the etheric force field given off by their fingers, which it is not. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't an element of truth that high voltage photography does photograph some elements of the etheric body. Nobody denies that. But just to lump the whole phenomenon in when it patently is not true is being, in my opinion, very disreputable. And for festival organizers to allow Kirlean photography booths to operate under that suggestion that they are photographing the etheric body is fraudulent. Now, when we talk about high voltage photography, we are meaning that a high voltage current is passed through the body and it causes movements of electrons. Now, electrons we consider to be the unknown. The electron we consider to be the unknown, the ultimate physical particle. We also know that the movement of electrons, in one direction produces a current of electricity in the opposite direction. So if you move electrons that way, a flow of electricity goes the other way. And that's what electricity is. That's the orthodox way. So what we're saying here then is that place a high voltage current, discharge, in an individual, and there will be movements of electrons. Movements of electrons. And wherever these movements of electrons occur, say that's one, next to a piece of tissue in the body, let's say a piece of muscle or bone, wherever these electrons stream past a piece of tissue, like the skin of the finger, these parts can then be photographed. These parts can then be photographed, and they emit certain manifestations of excitation. So a stream of electrons rushing past various tissues will cause the tissues to emit a variety of energy patterns. That's what they say. Cause the tissue to emit a variety of energy patterns. What is generally done is to make the person's finger or a tissue in his body, make that tissue one of the electrodes. And you all know that if you bring one electrode close enough to another electrode, to discharge, and you get a flash. What is now suggested that instead of this being an electrode, the person's finger becomes the electrode. And one electrode, say that's the finger, the electrode, and the other one still functions. The person's finger is nearest to a ground charge as possible. Now this phenomenon has been done in other ways. We do it in what is known as isotopes. We do it in isotopes. What we do is to take a radioactive material like iodine in solution and we inject it into a person, and the iodine starts to fall out, or if you like, be taken up in the gland that loves iodine, which is the thyroid gland. So the solution of radioactive iodine, which is what an isotope is, radioactive, is injected into a person. And as the blood flows through the thyroid gland, it takes up the radioactive iodine, and so we get a lot of radioactive particles wherever there is iodine in the thyroid gland, and that can tell us whether the thyroid gland is functioning properly. Tell us also something about its size, and so on. So by means of electrical excitation in tissues, we can photograph them. What we're doing here instead, though, is to put a high voltage current through the body and to photograph tissues. Now, this was done as long ago as 1891. It was then called a photography of coronal discharge. People were crazy about coronas at the end of the last century. In the Mahatma letters to A.P. Sinha, the Lord Kutumi described the corona of the sun, the emission of energy from the disk of the sun. Everybody said that looks as if it's the sun's etheric aura. They were right. It was then applied, the suggestion was applied to the human body. And a man called Tesla, T-E-S-L-A, a man called Tesla, who was a theosophist before, in 1891 began to discharge high voltage currents into his body. many others, names I did not mention, continued with this sort of work. Tesla began to show that what we now call static electricity could be used, that we could absorb 500,000 volts, and that it could flash out from our fingers. Well, we could do this quite easily in one of the sessions that we'll soon have at the college, and we can get a Van de Graaff machine, is to show that this is possible, that you can discharge flames from the fingertips, which will leap 2 feet, and that this has certain esoteric applications and therapeutic applications as well. So this work was being looked into as far ago as that, but in 1939 and afterwards, the Russian man S. Kirlean began to take an interest in the whole matter. Kirlean was different in that he began to use high voltage on plants and animals and photographed the effect. He found that wherever you had a flow of electrons passing near a piece of tissue, that an enormous variety of wave and energy patterns were emitted from the tissue. It was as if the electrons started the tissue and produced these extraordinary waves. So the emissions were not from the electrons. The emissions were from the tissues themselves. Now, we know that there is a wide range of energy emission making up the electromagnetic spectrum. And we all live within the electromagnetic spectrum. You study my book, Beyond the Intellect, we've gone into that carefully. Some of the bands of the electromagnetic spectrum we know of. There's the color bands. You can see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and sense ultraviolet. So there's ultraviolet, which we can't see, and there's infrared, which we can't see. And there are X-ray patterns that we can register, and so on. But there are great gaps in the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't detect, but they're there. Waves constantly flowing. Now, when you pass electrons past tissue in high voltage charges, it is not just the phenomenon photographed by Kirlean that actually occurs. In fact, when the electrons rush past a tissue, like something in your finger, radio noises are produced by the tissue. Radio noises. And they are of the lower frequencies. Also, the tissue produces infrared. The tissue produces visible light, which can be photographed, and Kirlean photography does that. And it produces ultraviolet light, which Kirlean photography photographs. But it also produces X-rays. So Kirlean photography is only photographing a fraction of the wave of the energy emissions of tissues which are excited by a passage of electrons going past them. If we wish to, along with the Kirlean camera, we could have radios, thermometers, ionizing chambers, and other devices to pick up all the energy emissions. But we tend only to observe the Kirlean photographical or photographable emissions, which is usually ultraviolet light and visible light. You have heard me talk about sensitivity today. You've heard me say that it's part of man's task, eventual part of the spiritual aspect of the electromagnetic spectrum. By that we mean the manifestations of Atma, or will, the vibrations of buddhi, or compassion, the vibrations of manas, or abstract thought, the vibrations of the mental body, thought forms, and so on. We are slowly tuning ourselves into these. So many of you are expecting to walk into the arms of a master. And that may be well true in this phase of our history. But the masters actually exist already in vibratory rates of energy, which we call Atma, Buddhi and Manas. And it is part of the spiritual progress of each of us to raise our vibrations to that kind of level. Then the master appears. And so in an energy sense, the old saying is correct, that when we are ready, when our vibrations are ready, the master appears. And if we had the devices and the instruments, we could tune into all sorts of vibrations, wave patterns, forms that exist in this room at the present moment. Notice how at the college we always try and reduce everything that we describe ultimately into terms of energy. You are nothing but a charge of energy. The energy expresses itself as action, as activity, which we detect as form, or basically energy and motion. Consider this charge that is put through the human being. The lower the frequency of this high voltage, the more saturated the tissues become. If that's a piece of tissue like a nerve bundle or a muscle bundle, if you have high frequency, there's high frequency, look. If you have high frequency, high voltage, then the high frequency, high voltage tends to lie on the surface of the tissue and not penetrate. If you have low frequency, there it is, low frequency. If you have low frequency, then the high voltage will saturate the whole tissue. And so the charge used in Kirlean photography should be of quite low frequency. But if you take it too low, then not enough light is emitted from the tissues as the electrons pass it, and therefore can't be photographed. So there is a band, a narrow band, in which the frequencies must be low enough, but not so low that they don't produce, as it were, an emission of light from the tissues, because then it wouldn't be photographed. What we really have to say here is that Kirlean photography effects that we see at festivals and places where we have our fingers photographed have very little to do with the aura. But, nevertheless, that little is valid. Now, when you are examining a photograph which you have taken of somebody's fingers, you see colors. And the colors tend to be, mostly, tend to be blue, blue-violet, most of all, The other colours that you occasionally see are yellow, green, red, in flashes. And people go into ecstasy if they see any of these colours on their finger photographs, because they think they've got some very special spiritual quality. Not true. The colours depend on the kind of current. Nothing has ever been traced to the quality of the aura. Whether you're photographing a saint or whether you're photographing a sinner, has nothing to do with the colours. The colours are related to the high voltage current. The colours will vary according to the surroundings of the tissue. Some tissues are bathed in fluids. Other tissues, like connective tissue, can often be very dry. So if the tissue is damp or it's dry, it will affect the colours. If the person's fingers are being squeezed down onto the pad, the pressure affects the colours. The temperature of the room affects the colours. The ionic content of the air in the room affects the colours. The amount of dust in the room affects the colours. You begin to see what I mean, that the path, especially when you are concerned with Kirlean college, is one of dispassionate discrimination. That you must subscribe to that which is not true. And even if you're the only person in a whole room or a whole hall that knows this, you should make it clear and not agree with the rest of them. Oh yes, we're photographing the aura. Oh, look at her aura, isn't it lovely? All beautiful colours, when it could be the result of any 10 variable factors. Whether she's in a tizzy and she's squeezing her finger down, whether the room is dry or damp, and so on. Now the colours also vary, it has been found, according to the layers of emulsion on the photographic plate. The emulsions are put down on the plate by the manufacturers in various layers. One emulsion is sensitive to green, another emulsion is sensitive to red, another emulsion is sensitive to blue, and so on. And the way in which they're laid down affects the production of colour in the result. Also, the angle at which the ultraviolet light from the phenomenon of the electron passing the tissue, the light that comes from that, the angle which it enters the plate affects which of the colours will show itself. And there's no good crying about it, because we will almost